This video was made in partnership with DJI. The same day I got impounded with this car, we'll talk about that in a second, and so she's going goodbye, is the same day I got an equally opposite perfect amount of good luck. The C8 is capable of being repaired. When I purchased the C8, it was meant to be a certificate of destruction. No title issued, you can't register it, it's basically just a parts car. Somebody in the state of Florida processed the title, and so I was given the title to my vehicle. That means it's time to do some really cool stuff with this car, get it completely restored, do it right, because it's worth doing it right now. We're gonna use as much as possible in the rotary vat. I just purchased this bandsaw and an end mill. That way I can start drilling my own irons and my own housings. What that means is that I can finally assemble the rotary engine, the 4-rotor, for this car. These are the 12 mil or ½ inch, I can't remember which, bolts for the 4-rotor. Beautiful, well done. Unlike my sex life, they don't fit, they're way too tight. So this whole engine needs to be basically bored straight through. And the goal is to get it as tight as possible with each of these. So there's a tool called a reamer that's gonna allow me to do as precise of possible bolt holes throughout this entire engine. I can also do the machine work on the center iron, so that way long story short, I can actually finally get ready to assemble this engine. I've been waiting on machining, and I can now do it in-house. We're currently going through the process of figuring out what connectors go to what. We had a sneaking suspicion that these were antennas of some sort, tire sensors or whatever antennas. They ended up being GPS type of sensors, and the funny part is they go directly over each of the tires. So we went through and labeled all the ones that were pretty obvious, matching everything together. This is the front has a latch, the front has like a soft close motor. Those are the windshield wiper, oh that's the tank, yep. And then we've got headlights, which are actually pretty big on both sides. So I'm disconnecting this wiring harness here because of the brake here. This looks like a front air sensor, like a temp sensor. Shielded lines that are actually like the navigation and like GPS sensors that we saw earlier. We're gonna go ahead and turn the car on, just the system on, now that that's disconnected, and see what systems are erroring. Okay. Service safety restraint system. Restraint activated. Oh, service required. Okay, yep, that makes sense. Open and close driver window. Interesting. She's running a little. Service keyless start system. Washer fluid, yep, that one makes sense. Headlamps, yep, that one makes sense. Hood release, that we can plug back in. Yeah, hood's open. This thing only has currently, what, a 4,500 RPM red line? And what I want to understand is that because the car's not warmed up, or is it because of something being damaged? I'm gonna go ahead and close off the coolant system. There is that third radiator over here. We'll see if the car can warm up to temperature and if the red line will change. I just got in the Mavic Mini Fly More combo. I have been missing out on good cinematic footage in the shop for a long time. My problem is that I'm very lightweight with what I do, because I'm all over the place. This means we're gonna be flying it in the shop. No way. This is so much smaller. It's so light. This is a huge benefit to me, is that it's a USB-based charger. These little things hide away down here so you don't even break these. It feels like I'm missing something because of how light it is. I'm wondering if this lets you charge. Oh yes. Well, this might not be the same for everybody else. If you whisper to it and you tell it sweet loving, it's like, I love you. Watch this. See? It's looking at me. It's determined I'm its father. They're showing beautiful footage of people doing really epic things that my footage will never look like that, not because of the drone, but because of me. Binding it to me. You are my child now. The Mavic Mini offers you the ability to capture footage at 2.7K at 30 frames a second, or even 12 megapixel photos. The ultralight design allows the Mavic Mini up to 30 minutes of flight time. You can choose from several different pre-programmed flight maneuvers called quick shots. Simply tap the desired mode and the Mavic Mini will automatically create stunning cinematic content. I can't thank DJI enough for sponsoring this video. There's no way I would have ever had cinematics like this before just because of how usable this thing is. This Fly More combo has one special feature I didn't know until I started playing with it. You can use the batteries to charge your phone. I wasn't aware of the Mavic Mini until recently, but I can tell you it is meant for a person like me. If you're interested in purchasing the Mavic Mini or the Mavic Mini Fly More combo, click on the link in the description, use my promo code, and get 5% off. I went over to AutoZone and found 2 random hoses that fit my needs. The kid that was there actually let me go in the back and size up what was supposed to be an inch and 3/16, and thankfully they had random ass hoses that fit that. I don't even know what these go to on the cars. So we'll use these to short circuit the cooling system on the front, rely on the radiator, the Z51 in the door to keep the car cool.
It's tight.
One random ass radiator hose, and it's gonna work. Focus, there you go. That to there. Who knew that I'd be using coolant so much in this? Just gonna have to be good at this. So here we go. Oops. I filled it up and the top one started pouring out. Wow. He fired it up for me and I didn't even think about it until after the fact. Wait, there's no coolant dumping out, so it must have done a number on it already. This should be the coolant reservoir here. So this should be empty. Okay, we'll go ahead and fill that up.
That one, at least if you spill it, it goes down and you can't see it. This caps. That's the exact same person.
Yeah, this thing's badass.
Is that meant to like push it?
Holding it at about 5 psi and just looking for any sort of leaks that may occur. Now that we've just short circuited that, because at this point we've got the radiators, which we know are bad, but we need to make sure that the metal tubing and everything else that is on the car does not leak. Okay, we are up to 10 psi now. And you can hear it bubble. That's getting more air out of the system. Oops. Everything held. None of the aluminum pipes are cracked. Nothing else along the cars is compromised. That would be dropping if we had problems. It's still going down. Wow, that's 2 full gallons into there. Spiked up from 96 to 106. Just stumbling, that sucks. 117. There's still air in the system when it jumps like that, or at least I don't know how quick this dash updates. 122. Go ahead and shut that down. We're going 3 for 3 on this one. And she's drying up. Oops. Got all excited. 167. Interesting. 172. Wow, she's really dropping in idle. Oh, that's interesting. It dropped in temp. I think it's gonna twist. There's no way that's 176 degrees. That radiator over there is room temp. Alright, so we've gotten up to about 187. This is the longest I've let this car idle. I don't know when the thermostat opens. So we'll hook the hood latch on, put a screwdriver into it to make sure it thinks it's closed. Oh, the fan's on. There we go. Thankfully, it's PWM, so it's pulsing, so it's really soft at the moment. Those things can go way harder. We're at 207. I'm gonna take this apart and splice these wires together very quickly.
This is the only Mac tool I have, but there's
The only thing holding this together was the tape. Oh my god, all of the wires are spliced completely. These two go to the front temp sensor. That's it. I just hope the circuit's not blown or some shit like that. We're gonna know more about this car than most of the engineers at GM by the end of this. All of this just to swap it out with a different engine. We now have the wiring harness to then be able to plug in the front hood latch.
It is not latched.
There we go. Now it's latched. Jason is saying -40.
Really?
Yeah, so that's sensors. It's reading that there's a sensor. Now it says, hey, watch out, there's ice. This hood mechanism has been quite complicated. This with this all works together. There we go. So he has actuated that. Now the car still thinks this switch isn't working. Hood latch would go in like such. And there we go. We've got a locked hood. This is actually working. This is telling the car that that's closed. But I realized there's one more piece to that puzzle. Security and safety. So this is in line with that circuit. So kids don't get trapped in the front. This is actually a pretty smart setup. So it needs this button working before the car will say, hey, there's not a problem. Just we'll plug this into this piece. Yeah, I think the car will now know that everything that is involved, or at least safety-wise, is safe, so we should get the error message to go away. Please tell me the hood is fixed. This is getting closer to thinking that the car's okay. Oh, we got Footloose from Kenny Loggins on here. Too bad I can't play that for you guys. The biggest problem I have so far with making this car run the rotary engine is, do you notice the top part of the tack? It's only 7,000, that's pretty low. If I get this tack working with the rotary, it's just have it max it out. Just
223.
Yep. She is pissed. Okay, yep, gotta shut it down. Wow. It's neat to hear the whole car fire up. The 4-rotor does something like that, but because the 4-rotor is so loud, you can't hear all the fans kick on. The engine aside, that makes me want to vomit. But the car itself, I gotta hand it to the guys at GM. I'm pretty impressed. I know a lot of cars, modern cars, are pretty badass, but check this out. There is the lines, those 3 lines that you see right at the center of the screen, are for this extra auxiliary radiator. There is a sensor on one of those, and there's like an auxiliary thermostat on there. We've put 2.5, almost 3 gallons of coolant into this car. Total capacity of this version of the Z51 is 24 quarts, so 6 gallons. My friends are not being very helpful at this moment. I have accidentally disconnected the tank line, not the radiator line. I'm not gonna name any names, but somebody dropped a clip while filling the auxiliary radiator, so I'm gonna just take responsibility and take this panel off. Torx heads, screws. Okay, so after 150 screws, nuts, and bolts, and plastic clips, this part wants to come out. If you are the GM mechanic engineer that made this, I want to apologize for you having to do all that work. And nobody is going to appreciate the effort you put into it. First thing I noticed, the electronic cutoff for the exhaust pipes. I'm going to be doing all new exhaust, so maybe we'll make 4 centers. Anyway, there's the radiator, the Z51 radiator, right there. Pretty badass, to be honest. And the really cool part to me is all of this is out of the way of the engine bay. So when we go to swap it to the rotary, this all is going to stay. The car just passed, and I'm using this hose to siphon things out, and I had it like this, and these 2 people drove by, and they looked at me, and I'm just like sucking what fluid out of a car. It was one of the grossest processes I've ever done. There's a temp sensor on the Z51 package, as well as a baby thermistor, or like basically a thermostat. So I'm assuming that metal spring gets weaker with temperature, and then allows coolant to flow. So we filled that whole system up by hand and by mouth. And we're gonna go ahead and fire it up and let the car idle more, again, trying to purge it of air. It's hot, but what we found out is that whole thing we were working on, it's a spring based on pressure, not even really temperature. Maybe there's a temperature element, but it wasn't until I revved the engine and held it to 3,000 RPM that we felt coolant bubbling through this system. It's really funny because we don't have the normal radiators on the car. So at idle, the car starts to overheat. As soon as you get it up to 3,000 RPM, it circulates through the radiator, the Z51 one, and cools the car down. So this car actually is colder at 3,000 RPM than it is at idle. So I've just plugged in the cell phone, XM, and GPS signal sensors over the wheels. I plugged in the 2 front crash bar sensors. Hopefully those don't get used. And then I'm gonna free this fan up. It's currently stuck. And then we're gonna plug that in as well. And we're gonna see if this car will actually run right. I just don't want the fan to do one of those things where it like gets stuck and it gets really hot because it's just wedged there. The door just keeps getting shorter throughout this video. Each time it opens, it doesn't close back up. Restraints, that we're not getting anywhere with those anytime soon. Way less errors. OnStar's working. GM, if you see this, please don't shut me out of my own car. Promise not. I've got to agree to something. They're definitely gonna know it's me. This is incriminating myself with OnStar. Yep, I highly doubt I agree with all of these. I must be connected to my phone, or it's its own antenna. You know what's really promising is I'm dicking around with all these settings. There's no check engine light. There's the seatbelt restraint system, which is obviously blown, but I do not have a check engine light after plugging all those sensors in. That's a really promising thing. Let me end the video with some revving. It's not rotaries, but it's still something. I wanted to turn on the LSD coupling, which is funny that it turns on even though the car's not moving. Sounds pretty good. Those check engine lights, that's the video for me. I wanted something. I wanted a result.